Hi there, my name's Eric, my friends call me E-Rock, and this is my kitchen air fryer, which is broken again. When I bought this at Costco, it was sold as the Emerald Lagasse Air Fryer Pro. By model, it's the TriStar GLA 1003. If I would have kept the receipt when I bought this, I would have tried to return it since it broke within the 1-year return window. I would have still had to pay the shipping out of pocket and hope they decided to send me a replacement, and been without an air fryer until they responded. Instead, I tried to fix it. I wish I had done a video about it then because I have gotten a lot of value from these YouTube fix-it-yourself videos on various products. I'm not the handiest guy in the world. I'm not a professional at anything. I'm just a house husband who in the last couple years has tried my hand at fixing a few of my small appliances around the house with probably a 50% success rate or less. But I did manage to fix this one a few months ago. I don't know how long we had it before it died on us the first time. I think it was like my wife wanted to say 6 months or maybe 8. And I fixed it. I wrote down November for the date I fixed it. I don't know the exact date, but if I'm generous and say it was November 1st, then my fix lasted about 10 weeks, which is not great. And in fact, I wouldn't bother fixing it a second time. This would be bound for the trash or electronic recycling, hopefully. But when I bought parts to fix it last time, I had to end up buying 2, which I'll talk about a little more later. But the point is that since I have a second part already, I might as well just go ahead and put it in and see if I can get another 10 weeks out of it. Also, the reason I wanted to make my own video was because out of all the videos I've watched on YouTube, they've been able to take me so far, and then usually my model will differ from the model that I'm seeing on YouTube. I had another air fryer previous to this one which broke. I watched some videos. I got a certain amount of the ways through fixing it, or taking it apart, I should say, before I reached a point where I couldn't take it apart any farther, and the part that I needed to get to, which on the Fix-It video was right there, on mine was buried a level deeper, and I couldn't get into that next level of infrastructure, whatever you want to call it. So that air fryer went in the trash, and this one I was able to go that next step. I dug a little bit deeper, and it was very difficult to do, but this time it should be easier because I've already done it once and I know how to do it. I left some of the screws out last time when I was reassembling it, so it's less to take apart. So let's jump into it.
My husband got this yesterday for $99.
I'm not Eva's husband, but I think my wife and I bought ours for $99 as well. Let's see if we can fix this for less than that. The Fix-It video I watched previously said to check the door of the air fryer to make sure it wasn't loose and preventing the air fryer from working. But as I found out later, the metal bumps on top of the fryer door are just attached to springs to hold the door shut. They're not wired in and have nothing to do with completing a circuit. The major problem, as I found out a few months ago, was that one time the door fell open while I was cooking. So I'll be sure to tighten up the door during this process. First thing I'm going to do is remove these cooking trays. There we go. You can see my air fryer is pretty dirty because we use it a lot. I'll also take this opportunity to clean it while I'm at it. One of my problems with these appliances is finding tools that fit. My standard screwdrivers don't actually fit in these screws, they're too big. So I have a set of miniature screwdrivers I picked up somewhere and they're almost too small. If my Phillips head screwdriver is too small for the screws, sometimes my flathead screwdriver will actually fit in a Phillips head screw, which is sort of counterintuitive, but seems to work. Once I get all these screws removed, I can take the door off. Last time I took the door completely apart, which was unnecessary, although it was an opportunity to clean in between the layers of glass on the door. But I'm going to remove it this time just to get it out of the way for later. And as you'll see, I'm going to be taking out a lot of screws from a lot of different parts, and I'm going to start trying to store the screws in groups together so I can remember what order to put things back together in and also to keep things grouped. Now I'll turn the unit upside down so that I can work on the bottom. First, I'm going to take off this cover for the power cord. Inside of here is a couple of tension screws that they keep the power cord held down so that when you yank on the cord, it's not yanking on the guts of the machine. It kind of, all the tension goes to this set of screws that are holding it down, I think. I'm going to want to take these tension screws off so that I can remove the shell of the air fryer without tugging on the cord and tugging on the guts of the machine. Now I've got 8 more screws that hold the shell on. I only put 4 of them back in last time because it didn't seem necessary to have all 8. Gravity is going to hold the machine down inside the shell, so it's not like, unless I'm picking it up and carrying it, it's not like those screws are really necessary. Now you see I can get the shell off. And you can see how it's wanting to pull on that cord, but now the cord is free to pull through the shell. We can see where it's connected with the red and blue wire to the switch. So this switch is actually what the door mechanism interacts with. When you open the door, it depresses a tab on the switch, which you can see my switch is kind of not working right now. There's supposed to be a tab sticking out that we'll see in a minute. And when you open the door, it depresses the tab, which causes a switch to happen. And then when you close the door, the tab is released again, and that's when your machine lights up. So I'd say this is more of a kill switch to cut power when the door is open, I think. It might be better to pull the clips off of the switch box first, and then unscrew the switch box, or leave it in place if it's not necessary to remove it. But sometimes I find these clips to be very tight and hard to get off, and I need to use like needle nose pliers to pull them off. Sometimes it's kind of hard to grab them in their current position, so I'm going to take the box off first. And here I see the tab coming out of the switch box is kind of weird. It's very loose. It's not springing in and out like it's supposed to. I'm trying to pull the tab straight off and not yank on the wires or bend them too much, more than necessary. And here you can really see that tab that I'm talking about. It's very loose. And then watch, suddenly it springs out. So I don't know if it had been caught on something or whatever, but in the middle of this operation, it went from being loose and not working to springing in and out like it's supposed to. And now it seems to be working, so I'm not going to replace the switch box for now, but I might need to come back to this later because I see that it was problematic for a while. Here I am testing the switch for continuity. This is a multimeter that I got really cheap, like less than 10 bucks. And all the multimeters I see in videos online beep when they have continuity. Mine doesn't beep. It doesn't make any sound. It just goes on. You can see on the screen, it goes from 1. It's supposed to go down to 0 or something approaching 0 when it has continuity. 1 means it has no continuity. So on my reading, it goes anywhere between 30 and 150 or something. That seems to mean it has continuity. I don't know if I need to test the switch for continuity or not, but I'm just testing sort of everything along the way. It's also just me learning as I go. Now that my switch is working again, I thought before I dismantle my unit further, I will actually put it back in place and plug the unit back in and see if it's working again, now that my switch is cooperating once again. Now that the switch is back in place and the unit is plugged in again, I'm still seeing that no matter what position the switch is in, I'm not getting any power. So I think that the problem still lies further inside, as last time, the fuse, probably. One of the things that gets increasingly annoying as I go is that as each layer of shell comes off, they're all still connected by wires, so I end up dragging 3 or 4 different pieces around. I suppose I could make it easier on myself by completely detaching every single wire, but it seems like some of them are probably soldered in, and that would make things much more difficult for me to get back together. As I peel back each layer, I'm testing continuity on the wires going into the system, because I want to be sure that the problem still lies deeper inside. I don't want to keep digging layers and layers deeper if I don't have to. So I keep testing things to make sure that the problem is still in front of me and I haven't passed by it somewhere along the way. So I've got no continuity here, so the problem is still deeper inside. Now I'm going to address these little sheet metal corner panels. You can see where I have taped them on. There was no need for me to remove them last time. I didn't know that at the time. But this time I'm going to remove them on purpose because when I get deeper inside, I will be able to fix what I messed up last time. I'm going to pop this top cover off. I found this kind of hard last time. It's held on by about 8 of these plastic tabs, and you have to just pop them. And it's not too hard, but to get all of them popped at once was a little difficult. This top shell is held on by screws from the top and bottom. I'm actually going to start by flipping this and pulling the screws off the bottom. They're down inside this trench, and it's actually too small for me to get my fingers in, so every time I unscrew a screw, I'm having to yank it out with pliers, just so because I don't want them to get lost and fall down in a hole and end up in another part of the unit somewhere rattling around inside that I can't get to. Now I'm back on the top, and there are 4 screws in these deep holes that I need to pull out. Now the top comes off, and it's held pretty, there are some connecting wires here that don't have a lot of give, so I don't want to yank this thing too hard and end up pulling wires. So like I said, I got multiple shells now off. I'm going to set the top half on top of the bottom half, just so it's not hanging by a thread, because I don't want that thread to pull out. I assume this white bundle probably controls all the LED lights on the front panel. This black wire is attached to the thermistor, which is a thermal sensor that reaches to the inside of the cooking chamber. That's one of the 2 things I replaced last time. And this is where it gets more difficult for me because it's reaching down inside of this tiny hole, along with the thermal fuse, which is attached to these 2 red wires. These clips here are attached to the heating element inside of the cooking chamber. Last time I removed these so I could pull the whole heating element out. I didn't find that necessary this time. I just loosened the heating element just enough to be able to reach past it. This red wire is where one end of the thermal fuse is attached to this circuit board. The other end of the thermal fuse is attached to this bundle of red wires, which goes out to the power cord. So now I'm going to pull the screws on the top half of the unit. Another layer deeper, we venture forth. Once again, just in the interest of checking things, I'm going to pull the thermal fuse wire off of this circuit board. And now I've got both ends of the thermal fuse. And I'm going to test continuity on that just to make sure that that is my problem. And there we can see with both ends of the fuse connected, no continuity. Last time I also replaced the thermistor, so I'm going to pull that cord off and see if I can test that also to see if it's bad. I'm not sure I tested it last time before I replaced it. I think I made an assumption based on something I had read. So I'm not sure if a thermistor has continuity the same way that a fuse does. I'm not getting a reading here, but I'm not sure if I'm supposed to. Here you see two thermistors. The smaller one is the one that came with this unit. Since TriStar doesn't make replacements for this thermistor, it's just kind of a crapshoot to see what you can find on eBay. I found two replacements that I guess had been scavenged from other units that were sold in a lot on eBay. The one on the left you see is the larger of the two. I thought it was too big to fit in my unit, so I used the smaller one, which is about halfway between these two sizes. That's the one that's currently in my air fryer. I'm going to go ahead and test this other replacement one that I haven't used yet for continuity, just to see. And since I'm not seeing any continuity on this thermistor, I'm not sure that that's something I should be looking for. Last time I replaced the thermistor just because I thought it was something I should do, but now I'm realizing that maybe I didn't even have to at the time. So I'm just going to replace the fuse by itself first and see if that does the trick. This is where getting deeper into the appliance gets more difficult just because everything is connected through wires and it's kind of just becoming hard to maneuver pieces without dragging on other stuff. I guess I could disconnect more things, but that's just more things that I'm going to have to remember how to put back together later. Okay, there's a better position. And this is going to be the hard part. See, my cords are going down in that hole and vanishing into the interior of this top half. So to get what I need to get to, I've got to crack this oyster open. On the bottom side of this, see, here's the inside of the cooking chamber. And that metal peg sticking through the size is the thermistor, the one that I replaced last time. One screw is holding it in place from the other side, and one screw or bolt is holding my thermal fuse. The problem I have at this step is that there is a shaft running through this top half of the air fryer, which spins this fan. On one end of the shaft is the fan, which is connected on with a nut onto the end of a threaded shaft, or whatever you want to call it. On the other end is the motor, which spins the fan. And these two ends, in order to get to the thermal fuse, I need to pull the two halves of this top half of the unit apart. But I can't because the shaft is holding them together on one end with the motor and on the other end with this nut on the end of this fan. And I think the way that I should be able to do it is to remove the nut. But unfortunately, it's on there too tight. And if I put a socket on there and turn it, all it will do is spin the shaft. It won't loosen the nut from the shaft. And there's no part of the shaft on the other end for me to grip onto with a pipe wrench or vice grips or anything, because it ends with this motor that it spins inside of. So instead of being able to actually take these two halves of the top half of the unit apart, I'm actually just prying open the side and trying to pull it as far apart as I can, bend it apart without actually taking the two halves apart, if that makes any sense. So to get inside of this crack, I'm just stretching it sort of as far as the plastic allows me to stretch, since I can't actually take these two pieces apart like I should be able to. And I'm going to actually do what I did last time. I'm going to pry these as far apart as I can, and I'm going to hold it open with this deck of cards. This is sort of my Zen in the art of motorcycle maintenance moment, where anything that will do the job will do. It doesn't have to be sexy. I think the reason I chose a deck of cards last time was because I could make it as thick or as thin as I needed to for the job, and then I could just bundle that as many cards as I needed. And now I'm looking down inside the crack. You can see the back side of the thermistor, and you can see the thermal fuse is inside of this black sheath, and it's pinned onto the side of the cooking chamber with this single nut and bolt. and this metal clip. And therein lies my challenge. It may not look it from this angle, but these things are about 3 inches down inside this crack, and this crack is too thin for my hands to fit in. So I'll be trying to take this nut off with a pair of needle nose pliers, which is fairly easy. But then I'm also going to have to put it back on with those pliers, which is not so easy. I flipped the unit up again. I'm going to loosen the heating element so that I can move it out of the way. Last time I entirely removed it. I don't really need to do that this time. I'm just going to loosen it enough to get my hands underneath it so I can get to those screws or bolts that are holding in the nuts to the thermal fuse and the thermistor. I might as well take this opportunity to point out that since the new thermistor I put in to replace the original is longer than the original, it was actually touching the heating element. Now, I don't know much about how this stuff works, but I was assuming that was probably not going to be good because the original one was not touching the heating element. It was close to it with a little gap. The replacement was touching. So what I did, as you can see here, this clip, which was over on this other side of the heating element, I rotated around so that I could use it to pull the heating element away from the thermistor. And I punched a new hole through the chassis just so I could screw it down, which worked. But now the heating element also sits up a little higher in this little basin. And there used to be a grating which covered the heating element, which I assumed was there to prevent somebody from stupidly reaching inside the unit and touching the heating element with their bare hands. So I removed a safety feature in order to make my fix work, which I do not recommend anybody does. As yet, nobody has burnt themselves on it. But what I did find is that occasionally I cook with parchment paper, and if I accidentally leave it in there and somebody turns the unit on next time, that parchment paper will get sucked up by the fan into the heating element and catch on fire. That has happened to us. So once again, I'm just a dumb guy trying to save a couple bucks. So don't do anything that I'm doing. Back to the crack, I have taken the clip off of the thermal fuse, and now I'm just trying to find the best way to pull it out. I'm going to need to feed one end of that red cord down through that hole so that I can address this entire cord. Okay, there, I've pulled one end of the cord free. I'm pulling as much slack off the other end as I can. And now we see. I can remove this black sheath. Inside is the thermal fuse. This is my replacement fuse. Instead of being soldered on like the old one was, or it was just wired in or whatever, this one I had to join with these two butt connectors, which allow you to join two wires by crimping each of them inside the connector. Now, I don't have a crimping tool. I used my vice grips. I put them on about the tightest setting I could, and I mashed the thing down, which worked. Now I'm going to try to mash it back in the opposite direction to open it up a little bit so that I can get my replacement fuse out. I'm realizing now that once that I pull the fuse out, the wires are going to be much shorter, and it's probably going to fall down inside the unit where I can't reach it. So I'm actually just going to tie this red cord using a hair tie. And a screwdriver. So that it doesn't fall back inside the unit. When I was looking for replacement parts the first time, I went to a local store that used to carry appliance parts, and they no longer carried them. They sent me to a second store, which does carry appliance parts, but only for bigger appliances like washers and dryers and refrigerators, not small kitchen appliances. But they had a lead for me. They sent me to an old timer 2 towns over who sells small appliance parts out of his garage. He sold me this fuse, I think for $5, and butt connectors. His fuse was rated for 240 Celsius. My original was 216. He said that was okay. I have no idea if that's why this burned out so quickly. But now that I know what I'm looking for, I also can find it on Amazon or eBay. This is what I bought this time. A lot. So this time I spent $7 on fuses, but it was a pack of 10. These replacements have the proper rating of 216 Celsius. Hopefully that'll be better than the other. I don't know. And the butt connectors was $7 and change, but I got a pack of 20. I used 2 on each fuse, so that goes with my 10 pack of fuses. Starting by crimping new butt connectors onto the new fuse. And then I'm going to crimp it on to the existing wire. Crimp on the other half of the wire. And now look once again, I'm going to take my two ends of the wire that have fed through the machine, going to hook it up to the multimeter to see if I've got continuity going through the replacement fuse. And there it is, just what I've been waiting for. Black sheath goes back on over the fuse and the butt connectors. This is where it's going to get hard for me, and this is because I don't have proper access to the place that I need to get to because I can't take the very top shell of this unit off. I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to lay the cord back in there with this clip to get the screw and the nut and the bolt on. The first part is hard enough as I'm going to try to feed this other end of the cord back out so both ends of the red cord are now coming out through this tiny hole. That's not so easy to do. What I actually ended up doing was pulling the wire back apart, feeding it through, and then recrimping it together again in the correct place. Talk about 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Now I'm just trying to figure out how to mash this all down so that the thermal sensor can be up against the side of the cooking chamber, but also be in position to get clipped back on. So here you see me working on the hard parts. I'm not going to show this entire process because I probably wrestled with this nut and bolt for about an hour. I was going to say now that I have all these extra fuses, I wouldn't be opposed to repairing this thing every 10 weeks until these fuses run out. Because now that I know how to do it, I could probably speed run this entire fix if I wasn't shooting a video in about an hour. But this nut right here is where I will get hung up for an additional hour of extreme frustration, which makes it almost not worthwhile. And I realize that I'm dealing with this because I didn't properly figure out how to open the two sides of this piece here to get to this thing that I need to get to. If anybody in the comments has a better way to do it, please let me know. Try different angles and different positions, and finally, I was able to get it. There it is, clip held down, fuse in place. Make sure my wire is coming out so that I can put that back onto the circuit board. Figure out how to set this back down without yanking all the wires out. Now I'm going to do something. I don't know if this is safe, so don't try this at home. But before I reassemble this entire unit, I'm going to take my two power cords. I'm going to plug them back into my switch, and I'm going to plug the unit back into the wall to see if I can power this thing on, just to make sure it's working before I spend all the time to screw everything back together. And moment of truth. As power, it's giving me an E1 message, but I already know what it means. It means that I forgot to plug the thermistor back into the circuit panel, which is also a good reminder that I don't need to test continuity on the thermistor because if the fuse is working, the unit has power, and if the thermistor is not working, the error code will tell me so. So now that it's plugged back in, try it one more time. And there we go. We have power and we have a working unit. All I got to do is screw it back together now. You can see here that I was so frustrated from that nut and bolt that by the time I plugged it in and made sure that it was working, I decided to save the reassembly for the next day. While we watch me reassemble the unit, let's go through and see how much money I spent on these fixes. Replacement thermistors, which I still have one unused, and I'm now realizing I probably never needed in the first place, cost me $19.95. My first replacement fuse and butt connector I think was $5. New box of fuses, $6.99. New box of butts, $7.18. Total spent on 2 repairs, $39.12, and I still have 9 sets of fuses left. Was it worth it? For 60 more bucks, I could have had a new one. But I wouldn't have learned anything, would I? So there we go, we're back in action. I'll let you know if it breaks again. And if I fix it again.